left. In 1/3 of a mile, turn right. In 1/4 of a mile, turn right onto Jackson Gap Street.
Planning to propose this holiday? Shane Company is ready now. Find your dream engagement ring.
About buying stuff on Instagram and getting scammed.
Yeah.
I'm just in general upset at all of these websites that tell you they got the cutest clothes on earth and it's a scam. Because every day I am bombarded with clothes I want to buy for very cheap.
Right.
And
Now
it's
turn right.
Yeah, because you click the link and now it's on your timeline. You're in the algorithm now.
Too much of that. And I don't like it. And I'm very mad at these companies for scamming.
In 1/2 of a mile, turn right.
There's a direct correlation to her and I seemingly that it got scammed. You get it, sure.
Oh, I would.
I'm still saying trying to wait to see if I get something that I ordered, but yeah, you just give it up, chalk it up as an L.
Okay, it's gonna come back to me. It's gonna come back to them. But I don't like it. I want all of this those cute clothes, and I can't have any of them because it's a scam.
That is a reason to be mad.
It is. I'm a man.
You are mad. And yeah, because your money's gone. What did they do? They probably eating it out back. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I hope that the scammer is enjoying it. But more so, I want the cute clothes off the website that's not real.
So what do you do? Because the clothes exist somewhere.
I don't know.
I mean, you just didn't get them. They just got you. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I understand why you're mad. Why are you mad today? 303-893-3767.
I've been up, throw up the second up.
Now turn right.
And I can put you in. I can put you in. I've been up, throw up the second up. And I can put you in. I can put you in.
Follow the road for
I
1
can see the whole
1/4
city
of a
from
mile.
Falcon. Back in 2019, I was outside crazy, but now they got it out.
Until I got married, my wife wouldn't let me do it anymore.
South at Macy's after. Spend less and do it all online.
In 3/4 of a mile, keep left.
In the darkness of winter, a celebration comes along to lighten homes and moods. On Colorado Matters, a Hanukkah extravaganza. For singer Julie Geller, there are many reasons this holiday matters.
One is pride in who you are, and the second is miracles. Hanukkah is a holiday of miracles.
Plus, lighting a menorah on the run at 9 on CPR News, KRCC. Supported by First Western Trust.
In 1/4 of a mile, keep left onto East 56th Avenue. Now keep left. Follow the road for 3 miles.
Legacy of Indian Boarding Schools in the United States. It's great to have you with us. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Gina. Why don't you lay out all that you found, and this in the year with the first Native American cabinet member, and they also had come out with a report, but your number was 3 times more, 3,100 dead children at these schools. Explain what these schools were.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. As you mentioned, we did work here at the Post with an incredible team of journalists. Terry Horwitz, my colleague, is an award-winning journalist here at the Post. We work with a team of data reporters and visual forensics reporters to do our investigation. And as you said, we found that 3,100 Native American, Alaska Native, and Hawaiian Native children died at these boarding schools. These are not what folks think of typically when you think of a boarding school. These are schools that were specifically designed, created with the sole purpose by the U.S. government of eradicating Native American culture and languages for the number one purpose, to assimilate them into white society. The schools were started in the 1800s. They ran for a period of about 150 years, and we really dug deep into hundreds of thousands of records to look into what really happened at these schools, what were the conditions, and found that sadly many of these children did not make it home and died at these institutions.
So Dana, could you explain, what brought you to do this investigation in the first place? And, what did these children, 3,100, more than 3,100 children, what was the cause of death? How did they in fact die?
Very good question, and thank you for asking. First off, for me, I'm Native American. I'm an enrolled member of the Hallawag-Saponi tribe from North Carolina, and as you played in one of your intro pieces, Secretary Haaland has said this many a times. Her Assistant Secretary Brian Nolan has said this many times. There's not an indigenous person in this country who doesn't know the story of Indian boarding schools or has not been impacted by this. These are widely known stories in Indian country. Unfortunately, they are not as known in mainstream press and in society. They've largely been ignored and hidden and just not talked about. So we really want to shine a light on this history. As you mentioned, Secretary Haaland, kudos to her, because for the first time, she's the only Interior Secretary to shine a light on her own department who ran these very schools. They were started under what was then called the War Department. We now know it as the Pentagon, and then they were put under Interior. So she took huge steps to do a 3-year-long investigation looking at these schools, and she found that many of these schools did have mistreat students. They were terribly run, and we expanded upon that work. Again, the Interior Department looked exclusively at federal records. We expanded beyond that, built upon that, and looked at hundreds of thousands of records involving census rolls, school enrollment records, death certificates, historical maps, talking to researchers who had done thesis papers for years, worked for 20 years on researching specific schools. We talked to dozens of Indian boarding school survivors who are still alive in their 60s, 70s, and 80s to hear their recollections of these schools.
So how was there such a discrepancy? I mean, clearly, she, the first Native American Interior Secretary, cared deeply about this issue. Why did they come up with 800? You come up with 3,100. And one of the things you looked at were the cemeteries on the grounds. I mean, how many schools in this country are connected to cemeteries?
It's a very good and sad question. Exactly. I have 2 children of my own, and their schools thankfully don't have cemeteries on their grounds. No school should have a cemetery on its ground. It's a terrible concept to think of. The Interior Department did spend 3 years on their investigation. They produced 2 reports that dug deeply. Again, she was the first secretary to look into this. It is a very personal issue for Deb Haaland. Many of her relatives went to these boarding schools, so it's deeply personal for her. She's of the Pueblo Laguna tribe. She knows this story very well. We took it a step further. They found 973 documented deaths at these Indian boarding schools, and we took it a step further by expanding our base. We looked not just at federal records, we looked at school records, we looked into the work that many researchers had already done. The sins of these schools are not unknown in Indian country. Many great Native American journalists have been writing about this subject for years. We just took upon that work and expanded it to really give it a complete public accounting that it hasn't had before, and to really tell these stories.
So Dana, could you tell us one of the stories, the one, for instance, that you begin with, Almeida Heavy Hair?
Almeida's story is incredible. It's really sad and deep. She's from the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation, about 30 miles from the Canadian border in Montana. And we got to know this tribe through a previous story we had done looking at sexual abuse of about 1,000 children at these schools. That story came out earlier this summer, so this was our second investigation. We kept in touch with Presidents Jeff Stiffarm, Mike Blackwolf, their tribal historic preservation officer there, and we knew that they were going to be attending an exhuming of 3 of their students who sadly attended Carlisle and died in 1890. Almeida, John Bull, and Bishop Shield were part of 22 students who were taken from the reservation to Carlisle. It still gives me the shivers to think of how we were such an honor to be able to watch their journey as they were exhumed at Carlisle in a very sterile place with these white marble tombstones. Think of a mini Arlington in a way. We watched as those tribal members and 19 of her relatives stood for 2 days and watched them to be exhumed. They sat on traditional buffalo robes. They used ceremonial pipes. They sang. They drummed. They spoke in their own tribal language. These are the very things that those children would have been punished for. They would have been beaten, with food withheld, and they sadly died. Those 3 children died within 4 years of being at Carlisle. Then as part of the ceremony of bringing them home, they were put in new pine boxes. Their remains, think about this, from 130 years ago, were very carefully exhumed, put in new pine boxes, wrapped in buffalo robes with traditional items, moccasins, earrings for Almeida, and put in these pine boxes and taken in a caravan for a 4-day, 2,000-mile journey back to Montana, where they were buried in their traditional way on a beautiful hillside in their homeland. As John Stiffarm, one of the ceremonial leaders, said, when the Army officials who now are in control of the Carlisle property asked him, "Do you want the dirt?" he said, "No, leave that dirt here. They're going to their homeland." You can tell that makes my voice quiver still, because it's just so powerful in me. Everyone across any culture. It's devastating to have your children taken and to watch them be exhumed 130 years later and brought to their homeland. There's nothing more powerful than that. We wanted to tell that story, and Almeida was our way to tell that story.
And Dana, if you could talk about the young boy in 1970. It's not only children, thousands who died at these schools, but those who tried to escape.
That's right. The story of Johnson Key West, who tried to escape to go back home. There were sadly many stories like his, dozens of stories, of children who tried to run away from these schools and make it back to their homeland. The thing I'll never forget about his death, sadly, is that on his death certificate it was marked as frozen. He died trying to get across a mesa, snow-covered hills and mesa, back to his homeland. I don't think any of us can really fathom, being taken from your home at a young age. Some of these children were as young as 5. Some of them were older teens who stayed at the school because they wanted them to be part of the forced manual labor that these children were required to do at these schools. One of our sources called these not schools, but rather prison camps. They were work camps. They were not meant to educate Native American students to become doctors or lawyers. They were meant to educate them, I say educate with air quotes, educate them in manual labor. Often the students were reported to be 2 to 3 years behind academically. Some students who survived these schools talk of coming home and having skills that were completely unusable in their communities if they managed to survive them, or just not being able to speak their tribal language anymore, and really being out of sorts, having been away from their homes for so long.
Dana Hedgepeth, we only have about a minute left. How has the impact of these schools, closed at the beginning of the 70s, impacted, half a century later?
Well, that's a good question and a big one. The impact of these schools is still being felt in many ways. As I mentioned, there are several hundred survivors from these schools They're dealing with the traumas of having gone through these schools, of having been taken away from their tribe, their communities, their families. That has a generational impact on how they raise their children or how they did not know how to raise their children, of grappling with what it means to be away from your home, away from your community, away from your traditions, away from your language. That's left a huge knowledge gap, as the Native Americans call it, in language and in culture. There is a rebuilding of those languages and of those cultures, traditions, but still it is very, very hard to deal with that trauma. Many Native American survivors are only now beginning to talk about these traumas from decades ago.
We want to thank you for being with us, and unfortunately we've run out of time, but your work is incredible, and we're going to link to your articles. Dana Hedgepeth, Native American journalist, Washington Post, member of the Haliwa-Saponi tribe of North Carolina, 25 years at the Washington Post. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
And Neapolitan Pizza, presenting a full beer and wine list available for dine-in on our heated patio or takeout. Fringe is located at 2900 Valmont Road in Boulder, Colorado. Fringe, a well-tapped eatery. More information may be found at fringepizza.com.
KGNU FM 88.5 Boulder, KGNU 1390 Denver, with translators K229AC Netherlands, K254CH Fort Collins, and K256CT Denver, Colorado.
Support comes from Plan Boulder County, a membership-based civic organization supporting open space, land conservation, and good governance since 1959. Plan Boulder County serves as a resource for voters looking to learn more about environmental and public policy issues. More information can be found at planboulder.org.
You might not know it, but if you have a donor-advised fund, you can make your membership gift to support your favorite music and public affairs programming by recommending a grant to KGNU. This is just one more way you can ensure that KGNU is always here to bring the very best musical explorations and trusted news and analysis to the Colorado Front Range. Donating your donor-advised fund is a great way to keep KGNU strong. Member support adds up to the largest share of funding and makes everything you hear on KGNU possible. You can get more information on how to recommend a gift from your donor-advised fund at kgnu.org or by calling our membership department at 303-449-4885. Thank you.
I'm David Hull with BBC News. The authorities in Syria have launched a big security operation against what they say are militias loyal to the ousted President Bashar al-Assad in the western province of Tartus. It follows the killing of 14 members of the leadership's security forces in the region on Wednesday. Our Middle East regional editor Sebastian Usher reports from Beirut. The unrest in Tartus, the home of the Alawite minority to which Bashar al-Assad belongs, and which formed the bedrock of his support, is the first big challenge to the Islamist-led factions that have taken control of Syria since sweeping the Petrol power. The authorities have vowed to pursue what they call the remnants of the Assad regime, which they hold responsible for the deadly attack in Tartus. Special forces from the HTS group that led the rebellion against Assad have been sent to the region to bolster the operation. But in fact, the leader of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, has promised to unite the whole country. He faces challenges to his authority, not just from the Alawites, but potentially from Syrian Kurds in the east as well. More than 10,000 people have died while trying to reach Spain by boat this year, according to a charity which works to protect migrants. Walking Borders say the use of increasingly flimsy vessels is mainly to blame. Here's our Europe regional editor, Paul Moff. It's only 100 kilometers to Spain's Canary Islands from the west coast of Africa, making this the most popular route for migrants trying to reach Spanish territory. But the waters in between have strong currents, which is why it's also the most common place for would-be migrants to drown. Others have died crossing from North Africa. The 10,000 total this year is the highest figure recorded by Walking Borders. European governments have tried paying African countries to stop boats leaving and making it easier to return those who arrive, yet the numbers apparently keep on rising. Memorial events have been held across the Indian Ocean to mark 20 years since the tsunami that killed more than 220,000 people. In the Indonesian province of Aceh, which bore the brunt of the disaster, people gathered at prayer sites in memory of victims buried in mass graves. The tsunami caused devastation across the region, killing people as far away as East Africa. Opposition politicians in South Korea have filed a motion to impeach the acting president as the country's political crisis continues. Han Duck-soo took over after his predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol, was impeached for trying to impose martial law. Our reporter Rachel Lee has more from Seoul.
Opposition parties are doubling down, calling Han a puppet of President Yoon and saying he's failed as a caretaker leader. And on the other side, Han's camp and the ruling People Power Party are firing back, accusing the opposition of overreach and saying they're interfering with his constitutional duties. And there's also been backlash from some who feel this is just political theater that's adding to the country's instability.
World News from the BBC.
It's 8:04 on listener-supported KGNU. This is the Morning Magazine for Thursday, December 26th of 2024. Hey there, I'm Jackie Sedley. Coming up on today's program, a special holiday edition of Radio Nibbles, our weekly segment with John Lindberg. We'll be covering John's best of 2024 hits. Then, at 8:30, Angela Palermo interviews writer, teacher, and queer activist Amy Herman for her LGBTQ+ show Outsources. That show airs every Monday evening on KGNU at 6:30 p.m. Coming up at 9 o'clock, it's the last Radio Book Club of the year. This morning, we hear from Denver-based author Stephen Dunn, who has co-authored a new novel called Tannery Bay. At 9:30, it's the Morning Sound Alternative. That's all coming up in just a handful of seconds. Well, you can tell by the sound of that tune that it's time to get really hungry on Radio Nibbles with some of John Lindorf's favorite tastes of 2024. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Jackie, and good morning, everybody, and happy Boxing Day.
Happy Boxing Day indeed. Do you know why it's called Boxing Day? I don't.
It's one of those things I always have to look up, but it's a bigger holiday in Canada and England.
Right.
Here it's eternal. Here it's still for the store day.
And hopefully you still get a day off of work.
Right. But I think what people should go do is to just sneak out to eat some of these delicious things that
I'm sure that's my plan, so let's get right into it, John. So you have a huge list here. I feel like you potentially eat a lot more memorable food than others might, who don't prioritize seeking out good food as a part of their week to week, as you would.
Yes, and in terms of how I pick these,
yes.
Some of it's random. Some of it is because I want to try a new place. And I've sort of committed myself not to go back to, at least as far as the writing goes, I don't go back to the places I ate the year before. Sometimes I over the years, especially when I was a restaurant reviewer, I would go to these wonderful restaurants twice, write a review, rave about it, and then never go back because I had to go on to other restaurants.
Right. So do you just sit down and reflect on the year that was and try to see what stuck in your head, or do you write these all down for the year and then this list?
No, it's much easier. If you go to boulderweekly.com under food, you'll see all of my columns from the previous year. So what I do is I go through all of those and pull out the things that I liked, that I tasted. And then I work for other publications. So for instance, I have Jaeger Schnitzel at the Prost Brewing Company in Northglenn. I did that because I had an assignment from this golf magazine to write about that place, and it turned out to be really excellent German food besides great German beer.
And what did you get there?
Jaeger Schnitzel. It's a pork cutlet with a nice sauce.
Oh, so it's in the name.
Yeah. Yeah, and they also have, soft pretzels and all that kind of stuff. But one of the cooler things I found last year was I found really great, salt paneer. That's right.
I love salt paneer.
It's one of my favorites, and so I have that in a lot of places. And I stopped in Lafayette to get some gas, and I looked and saw that there was this restaurant inside, and it's called Mountain Bites, and it's a small family-run Indian Nepali restaurant, and they have great saag paneer, and you can get it with naan and steamed basmati, and the best thing though is gas station chai.
And I remember you talking about that one, and it really stuck with me, John. When you're looking for somewhere to go, somewhere to write a column about next, somewhere to eat next, how do you, I know you said you started to touch on this, but are those sometimes just places that you keep your eyes peeled and you see them and you walk in?
Yeah, I mean, it's tied in with the other thing that people notice about my columns and about Radio Nibbles is that I keep track of all the restaurants in Boulder County that are opening, closing, coming, and I'm the only person that does that, and near as I can tell, I'm the only person that's done that for many years. So if you look at my last week's column, it lists all the restaurants that opened and closed in Boulder County in this past year. A lot of times people don't keep track, and they go, oh, I didn't even know that was open, and now it's closed. But in the process of doing that, I go, oh, there's a restaurant in Longmont that serves runzas. You know what runzas?
No.
Take bread dough, wrap it around, a tasty filling, bake it. So it's like a calzone, basically. But it's fast food. So my taste runs from, to very, fairly rarefied stuff. Like the shortbread sandwiches served at the Sudi and Company in Boulder. We had a guest on who talked about that, but exquisite shortbread fig jam sandwich with candied walnuts made with imported butter, and my God, it was just stunningly delicious.
I love the adjectives you use for food. I thought about that a lot over the past year too.
Yes, I just found a column I wrote 40 years ago, so I have been at this a long time. Over time, you learn that, there's a lot of words that are meaningless. Delicious, tasty, yummy, not that I don't use them occasionally, I prefer something that says something specific about how it tastes. And then there's other things that are just hard to describe. You haven't died until you tried to review a steakhouse.
Why?
What do you say about a steak? Tender.
Juicy.
Tender, juicy, bloody, yummy. It's a real limited range of things you could say.
Yeah.
So, I'd much rather review pizza, which I did a lot of the past 3 months.
Okay, tell me about some of the pizza you ate.
Again, I self-assigned myself a story to discover the square pizza phenomenon. Not wedges, square. There's 3 or 4 different varieties, including Detroit style, which essentially means that it's cooked in a pan instead of flat. It's square. It's more like focaccia. It's fluffy. But they put cheese all around the edges and underneath, and it turns into this incredible toasted cheese crust on the pizza. But if you're looking for great Detroit style pizza, I recommend that you either go to Rock City Ice and Pie